Hello, and welcome to the Kathleen Spracklin podcast. I am a woman on a mission to gather a cadre of writers, thinkers, and teachers who are transforming the world, one character at a time. And it all starts with one thing, a deep understanding of human motivation, why people do what they do, and the forces that drive them. To gain that understanding, I am mining the intersection of psychology, theology, and philosophy to make you a better writer. This is episode 76, Writing with Emotion, How the Book Came About, part 2. This is a story of how I came to write my new book, which, by the way, my proof copy came in today, and I will, at the end of this, I will show you a few pages. The story of the book began with trying to help my niece. She had given up writing because she was homeschooling her 3 young sons and just did not have time available in her schedule to be able to put together a solid block of time to write. And I had left pondering how on earth I could come up with a system. Well, why did I think I could come up with a system? Well, that's who I was. I'm a system creator, a solution provider. That was my job. Now, mind you, they were all computer systems, and they were, of late, they had been all for business computer applications. I was an in-house programmer for a distribution company, but I had managed to solve some pretty crazy situations. For example, on the first day of COVID lockdowns, our company went from an average of about 400 web orders a day to suddenly, on the first day of COVID lockdown, 10,000 orders for needles, elastic. Well, suddenly everyone wanted to sew face masks, and we were one of the few online providers of the materials for that. So what do when you have to go from 400 orders to 10,000 orders? Well, and they were all for a very limited range of products. Now, mind you, the company had tens of thousands of products, but at this particular time, everyone wanted the same items. Well, we had to come up with a solution. And the solution we came up with is, instead of printing out the pick tickets and taking the sheets one order at a time out to the warehouse to get the product and then bringing the product up to the packing area, what we decided to do instead was go collect the product for a whole group of orders and bring it in to an assembly area and pack the products that way. Well, the only challenge was I had half a day to do the coding. It happened. We found an answer between my boss and I, the owner of the company and I was just accustomed to finding answers to problems like that. So it had to be that I just had to work on a solution that would come to light. In particular, a particular thought occurred to me that I love to sew. I've liked to sew. I've enjoyed sewing since I was a child. Very nice that the place I worked happened to be a wholesale distributor of sewing notions, so that was very much up my alley. But even as crazy as my job became and as many hours as I worked, I could always find time to enjoy my creative outlet of sewing. And part of the way was to keep a sewing basket by the side of my chair. If I sat down to watch TV, I could pick up my sewing. I could do a counted cross-stitch project, a big picture, a nice wall-sized picture in a year. It didn't matter that it took a year. And also, thanks to a wonderful book, 10, 20, 30 Minutes to Sew by Nancy Zeman, I was even able to enjoy doing garment sewing. And in fact, I ended up sewing wedding gowns. They were my real favorites. Both of my daughters walked down the aisle in gowns that I had sewn start to finish for them. Also a sister-in-law and a cousin in gowns that I made start to finish. And I also substantially refashioned wedding gowns for a friend and for said precious niece. So I knew that it was possible to do even significant projects in short spans of time. Why couldn't this be true for writing? Well, when you talk to teachers of writing, they tell you you need a minimum of 2 hours of time. And Stephen King says if you don't have 4 hours of time, forget it, you won't be a good writer. So I had to figure out what was the nature of the problem. Why couldn't you take these small bits of time and put them to good use? So that was the problem as I had left it off. Well, it turns out that there is a rather important reason why those tiny fragments of time aren't very usable in the usual way, and that has to do with the emotions of the story. Any good story is going to be replete with emotions, and if you're writing in a small fragment of time, it can take all the available time just to get back into the emotions of the story, and then there's nothing left to write in. So that was the challenge that I was working through. Well, I had also, at the same time, I was actively working on my Zettelkasten. Oops, can you see it here? I call it Zeke. Can't really see it very well, but it's in those file boxes. And I was actively growing my Zettelkasten. So I was gathering information, and that meant that things didn't remain in isolation. One of the posts in the Scott Shepard letter community that I was a member of posted that Richard Feynman, famous physicist, would always keep 10 or 12 problems that he was working on. And anytime he learned anything new, he would stop and see if the new thing that he learned gave any insight to any of these 10 or 12 problems. Well, I created that card. I thought it was a great insight. I wrote the card, and then in the process of filing in my AniNet Zettelkasten, you find the most closely related card in your Zettelkasten, and that's where the new card goes. So this one ended up landing right next to a card by Sertalanges from the Intellectual Life, I probably butchered his name, in which he was talking about preparing your mind for the next day's work. By at the end of the day, you tidy up your desk, you set out the work you want to do the next morning, and you imprint that on your mind before you go to sleep. Of course, the idea being that your subconscious mind will be working on the problem for you overnight. So those two cards ended up right next to each other. And one of a very common rule, and that's one I very firmly adopt with the Zettelkasten, is that when you add a new card to your Zettelkasten, you should not only put some of your own thoughts, how you reacted to that new card, but you should also put something that connects it to the card that it was right next to. How did those cards relate? And the thought, of course, to me, the way they related was rather simple, that Feynman was doing this with a set of 10 or 12 problems. He was, by constantly asking himself, does this solve any of those problems? He was keeping his subconscious mind busy working on those problems. And that's as far as I'm going to get tonight. I'm running out of time. And so I'll continue the story tomorrow. But in the meantime, I'll give you a quick glimpse into the book. And I'll do that a little bit each time. The book is full color. Well, it's going to be hard to fit it in this little window. It's full color, has illustrations and diagrams. I'm really thrilled with it. I think it really conveys the material that I'm trying to teach, and if you go to my website, I'll point out how you can pre-order the book. Actually, what you'd be doing is getting on an early bird list for notification. I'm going to be sharing the book at cost, and that means that all you'll be asked to pay for is the actual cost to print it and ship it to you. And you can join the list to get an early bird notification on my website, www.kathleenspracklin.com/earlybird. And I'll keep you posted. It can't be long now. I mean, it can't, it's got to be days, at most a week or so. And this book should be ready for ordering. So I'll talk to you tomorrow with some more of the story. Bye-bye.